All right. Well, welcome to the Lawrence County Museum. We're so glad that y'all are here tonight. You battled the rain and came out. My name is Connie Post, and I'm the executive director here at the museum, and we're so glad to welcome you. I want to tell you about a couple things coming up before we introduce our speaker tonight. On July 7th, which is a week from this coming Saturday, we will be opening a textile exhibit. It is one that we borrowed from the South Carolina State Museum, and then we are adding in a lot of Lawrence County textile information that will be open through July the 26th. Also, on June 7th at 10 o'clock here in this room, we will be doing a Revolutionary War artifact display. Durant Ashmore, who's a battlefield preservationist, will be with us that day. We have just acquired many artifacts from the battlegrounds of Old Hammond Store and Fort Lindley, and those will be for your to view, and he will be discussing those. So that's at 10 o'clock on June the 7th. On June 10th, Durant will be doing a lecture at 7 p.m., and normally he does a topic, a specific hero of the American Revolution, but this one is going to be a freewheeling, that was his words, a freewheeling discussion of all the things that he's learned over the last several years, Q&A type of thing. So please join us for that. I want to introduce to you today Ann Humphries, who I'm going to share a little bit about her, and we're so pleased to have her with us. She is a South Carolina Humanities Speaker Scholar from Columbia, and she tells audiences about the blazing talent of South Carolina's Julia Mood Peterkin from Fort Mott, Calhoun County. And until this month, Peterkin was the only South Carolinian to have won a Pulitzer Prize in Literature for her 1929 novel, Scarlet Sister Mary. On May 5th, I believe it was, Percival Elliott was named Pulitzer Prize for Literature. He's the second South Carolinian to receive this award. Humphries also speaks on the Cleveland School Fire, Kershaw County, 1923, Clara Barton and Harriet Tubman in Beaufort County in June 1863, and her journey through blindness to poetry in a Poet and Gift of Blindness. Ann's debut poetry collection, An Eclipse and a Butcher, was published in 2020 by Moody Ford Press. And she's working on her second manuscript of poems, which has been submitted to an editor. She's won awards for her poetry, and as a South Carolina notable woman, her papers are archived in the USC Thomas Cooper Library, and she reads and writes with assistive technology. And I just had the opportunity to have dinner with her before we came. She is a pleasure. You're going to love what she has, her personality and what she has to say, and we admire the fact that she just blazes on. And I want to tell you just a little bit about her family for those of you who are watching or here tonight from this area. She has deep ties to Lawrence County. Her parents, Charles and Barbara Chadwell, lived in Clinton from 1976 to 1994 when they retired, and her father, Charles, was the regional superintendent of the upstate for the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs, and then they lived on the campus of Witten Center. And I have a daughter who lives at Witten Center now, so I just am honored to know your family, and am grateful for the wealth of input that they put into this county, because it has benefited so many people. And there's actually an endowment at Presbyterian College for special education in his name. And her mother, Barbara, started probably what was the first hospice here in Lawrence County. And she was served as president for several terms of the Friends of the Lawrence County Library. And we know that Clinton just opened a brand new branch. So how, sometimes things are very far-reaching. And so I think it's serendipitous that Ann is with us today, and I want to turn this over to her. And we're so glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks. Where are we? Yeah. Y'all get extra credit for coming out in the rain. Can you hear me okay? All right. And I do use assistive technology because over time I had adult onset blindness. It's just been real gradual. And so I'd like to know, it isn't fatal and it doesn't hurt and it's just is what it is, you know. And no one in the family seems to have had it, so I was the one off, as they say. So I want to just see who's sitting where. Am I pointing too far? Is that about right? Okay. And have a question, just go ahead and call it out. Or this is Fiona Stanton. She's a graduate assistant. Well, she's in graduate school at the University of South Carolina in poetry, and we're trying to keep her in South Carolina. She's from Idaho originally, and came through Davidson for her undergraduate, which she probably got a free ride. I guess you got that. And then now she's free ride because she teaches. Is this sound okay, Connie? I'm hearing an S. Is it all right with y'all? Okay, here's what we're going to do. She's going to give me a cue in 15 minutes, so I'll know, and then another 15 minutes. We'll have time for questions and answers. I'm not in a real big hurry to get home. So I mean that to say is we'll have times for question and answers, and if you want to just talk some more about Julia Mood Peterkin, we can do that. So I'm not going to be dashing out. We're going to have a series of slides, and these are new slides. Some of them are brand new slides that they debut here from recent, when I was presented at the library at Calhoun County. And Carol, where are you, so I know where you are? Say yes. Carol Gaines, you're over there. Okay. All right. If you knew my mom and my dad, which is good. So we're going to show the slides, and I will elaborate on the slides. Fiona will read some of the things I usually do because I'm getting over a cold, and I want to make sure my voice lasts to the end of this program. It's amazing. Who's done the research here? Is Debbie here? Debbie Hunt, is she here yet? Oh, she's still greeting. So who's done some research on Julia Mood Peterkin here? Peggy, was that you?
No, I wish it was.
You, Connie? Thank you. Well, she was born October 31st, 1880, here in Lawrence County, somewhere. And we'll find out. It'd be nice to know where she was. But she only lived here for 2 years because her mother died of consumption. I'm just going to talk in general about her right now, and then we'll get to the slides. Then her mother asked, and this is important because this influences her writing. Her mother asked that she be taken to her paternal grandparents, the Mood. Her father was Dr. Julius Mood, and her mom was Alma Mood, and she was the third of 3 sisters, and they were influential in her life. She went to Converse College and got her master's in comparative religion. Excuse me. I really rested my voice. And I'm so excited about this program because I'm going to do an editorial, an op-ed, about Julia Mood Peterkin and send it to this newspaper. We've already notified Kathleen Parker of the Washington Post because Julia Mood Peterkin needs to be recognized just as much as Percival Everett needs to be recognized for having held that position for 96 years as the only South Carolinian. I'll let Fiona drive here for a little bit. Okay, can I use the microphone?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Is this all right? Thank you. All right. So we have just a little bit of context, how Anne kind of has interacted with Julia Mood Peterkin's legacy. Here she is with Julia Mood Peterkin's great-granddaughters, Amy and Laura. And then here she is. She was in Fort Mott in Calhoun County in March of just this year. And she's there with the descendants of the workers from Longsign Farm and the great-granddaughter, Amy. We also, Anne and I, put together a couple timelines. This first one is a timeline that shows the birth dates of Julia Mood Peterkin and some of her contemporaries, just to give you an idea, if you haven't heard of her before at all, of kind of where she sits. So on the one side over here, 1868, W.E.B. Du Bois was born. Then we have Carl Sandburg a little bit later, 1878. Julia Mood Peterkin in 1880. You'll see Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, William Faulkner, Margaret Mitchell. We also have Eudora Welty a little bit later, 1909, and then Harper Lee, Flannery O'Connor, Truman Capote, some of those other big Southern writers a little bit later on the other end. We also put in Strom Thurmond and his daughter, Essie Mae Washington Williams. Anne, did you want to talk a little bit about that, if you're ready?
Just for obvious reasons, because Julia Mood Peterkin wrote about mixed race children from the farm hand mothers, the workers, and I just thought that was relevant because we know they're biracial people around multiracial people, okay?
Yeah. And then we have another timeline that sort of situates you in the literary moment that her novels come in.
Can you hear okay?
Can you hear okay? Sorry. So you can see here, Green Thursday, Black April, and Scarlet Sister Mary are all Julia Mood Peterkin's novels. And then we put in some other major books from around the time period and other books from Southern writers that were writing about similar topics. So you'll see Green Thursday, Black April, Scarlet Sister Mary, those all come around the 1920s, sort of the mid-1920s. The Great Gatsby in there as well, as another kind of seminal novel. Look Homeward, Angel, just a year later after Scarlet Sister Mary, the third of those books that JMP wrote. Gone with the Wind, the other sort of, I guess we might want to say more famous novel about, again, a similar topics, all the way in 1936, so about a decade after Black April. And then Their Eyes Were Watching God, similar time, 1937, and All the King's Men in 1946.
Okay, what's next?
In this next slide, we're looking at Anne. She's touching a statue of Julia Mood Peterkin, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see an example of Julia's handwriting in a letter to Elsie.
What's next?
This is the home of Julia Mood Peterkin. This is actually where she wrote the books as well.
And next?
And then this photo shows the parlor room, including the piano that Julia Mood Peterkin practiced on. She actually took the train into Columbia for her piano lessons. She told the piano tutor stories of her life on the plantation, this place where she grew up. And he's the one who told her that she should write down these stories, that there was something there that others needed to hear about too.
Now are we at the gravestones?
Then we have a picture of Carl Sandburg and H.L. Mencken.
Let me stop and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, Carl Sandburg, the wonderful poet, Chicago, and whose home is at Flat Rock. And some of you may have been to it. Fiona, being from Idaho, didn't realize that, so she's going to traipse herself up and go see Carl Sandburg. Julie Mood Peterkin had so much advocacy for herself. She had spunk. She did feel, according to scholars, that her father abandoned her, and so she was, when she was little, even though her mother said, please ask his parents to raise her, because the older two daughters were being raised by the father, who consequently moved to Sumter. He was a physician. And so she had this maybe motivation to impress her very smart father. I told you she went to Converse and got a master's in comparative literature, and then she got a job at Fort Mott and came down on the train, and the heir of the Langsyne plantation, which was acquired by the family in 1883, so it's 6 generations still in the same family. And I've been to that property, and it's on the bluffs of the Congaree River. I did not realize Congaree River had 200 to 300 foot bluffs, and it's rising, and it's cotton country. It's red clay. I thought it was black dirt, but it's red clay. And I'd like to, well, I'll tell you what made Julia so strong. So she started writing in 1921 when she was age 41. And she had gone through the requisite DAR and Confederate Daughters of the Confederacy, the Daughters of the Confederacy, and she had tea parties and bridge clubs and that kind of thing. But one of her friends was taking piano lessons at what's called Chicora College. One of our sons lives at the corner of Chicora and Wofford in this neighborhood in Columbia that's named for all the small colleges in the in the state. It was a women's college at the turn of the century, of the 20th century, and it was merged eventually with Queens College, which is now in Charlotte. But she told these stories, and like she said, the piano teacher said, you need to write these down. But she also starred in the town theater and had the lead role. She was redheaded and very tall and had energy. She had a presence about her. It's a movement. That's what I've heard and read. There's a lot of movement to her, excitement, electricity, perhaps. So she starred in town theater, so she came back and forth. And one of the wife of the owner of town theater worked with Carl Sandburg in Chicago. And so Julia Peterkin had been writing these stories, and Carl Sandburg's coming to South Carolina to speak to the Poetry Society of South Carolina in Charleston, which he was doing. If you know of him, he would do troubadours. He'd be a troubadour, and he would go to different places with his guitar and read his poetry. And so she wrote him and said, my house is on the way to Charleston. Please come stop by. And of course, he didn't respond, because who is she? She wrote him again and said, a gentleman does not refuse a lady's invitation. And so he said he would come. And sure enough, he came to Langsyne Plantation, read her stories, introduced her to H.L. Mencken, the literary critic of the late 19th century and through the early 20th century. And he was kind of caustic. He said that the South was a Sahara desert of any literature. But she started reading Julia Mood Peterkin's work. Julia also wrote during the Harlem Renaissance. You know, she was in South Carolina. This is the Langston Hughes, and W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a black social worker, social change, called her the voice of truth and beauty. And what distinguished Peterkin's prose was that she just wrote of the farm people working their very difficult and dangerous jobs close to the earth. And they faced hog cholera. The pesticides were poisonous, caused mercury poisoning. Her saddle horse was gored by a wild hog. There were congenital abnormalities born and people unable to get those fixed, and so there were people crawling instead of walking or hobbling. There were people who were maimed in some of the baling material. It was real macabre, but it was real. It was real, and she was able to develop a Gullah dialect that was readable and understandable. Unlike Ambrose Gonzalez, who published the state paper in the late 1800s in Columbia, you might know that name. Peggy, you might know him if he translated it with a very condescending manner and used the word like monkey and drooling and like they were not serious people. But Julia thought of them as serious. So Carl Sandburg and H.L. Mencken began to introduce her to different people in the publishing business. She had her poems published in journals from 1922, 23, 24. In 1924, September was her first book called Green Thursday, and it's about a man named Killdeer. They're the funniest names in here she uses. She has great slap-your-thigh hilarious things, which I'll tell you some. And then as well as the macabre, the very difficult things. For example, she named her plantation in the book Blue Brook, which was set in the Waccamaw Neck where Brook Green is. I did not expect this, or I would have postponed. She also had a tendency to embellish, and she would mix up people's names on purpose. So they would write about Fiona, but what really happened to Carol Gaines is then Fiona would get upset because I did not do that. But the descendants, you saw all those people, the descendants have made their peace. There's been a repair, and there's mutual respect. And I was just down there for a picnic in late March where they're raising funds to restore the Black Children's Schoolhouse, which Julia talked Eleanor Roosevelt into building on the plantation. There were 500 families on that, so it was a little village. There was a main street. And I told you there's something, to me, very special about that land. When I walk on it, I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. I feel kind of inhabited, and I can look around and feel the fields and the cotton this tall. People tell me these things, but I sense it through my feet and through my skin. And I was able to be a guest and go through the house, and you saw the picture of the parlor with the grand piano. I got to touch that. And this is kind of just a conversation, because you all might know some things about Julia that I'd like you to tell me, so we can share. Julia was known on the streets of New York City after her first book, Green Thursday. Okay, let me tell you about that a little bit. Killdeer and his family. Here's and they talk about the superstitions and the medicine, the herbal remedies, and in this book, there would be people coming and going. Suddenly, a woman or a man would go away because, one, they might have been having an affair, but they also were looking for a better job because it was subsistence farming. She wrote so well that Ethel Barrymore played her on Broadway. Scarlett's Sister Mary was on Broadway. Katharine Hepburn, Aaron Copland, Sinclair Lewis, the author. Well, I told you about Eleanor Roosevelt. Dorothy Dandridge, the black actress in the late 40s, wanted to play her in a movie. That never happened, but that's the kind of stature. Julia Mead Peterkin, and for whom you can be very proud. Julia Mead Peterkin had honorary doctorates. She was called to judge literary contests, give speeches, speak at conferences. I mean, she wrote for things like Good Housekeeping and Saturday Evening Post. She was a celebrity. And she's the most famous person you've never heard of, you know?
What about 20 minutes?
Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. What is it?
So we're looking at the grave of Julia Mood Peterkin and her husband, William. And this is in Fort Mott.
I've been there. That was pretty cool. Okay. What's next?
In this slide, we're looking at the wedding portraits of Julia and William.
Okay. So they fell in love, and she married the heir to Langside Plantation. So they got pregnant right away. And she wanted her father to deliver her. So he was over. She labored for 31 hours. And he said, Dr. Mood said to the husband, Willie, do you want her to go through this again? And, you know, he was, what do you got to say? Of course, he didn't want to, but he didn't know that the common thing was to sterilize the women by removing their ovaries. So here she is, knocked out. She gets her ovaries removed without her permission. She wakes up, she has this baby, but she has to contend with the idea that her father and her husband made a decision without her that influenced her whole life. And it made her mad. It also was very depressing for her. So she was one of 6 white people on this plantation with 500 farm workers. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't white people around and people of her social status. They were. My husband is from Bishopville, and his rural family has more entertainment than we do in Columbia. They're always having some kind of barbecue or come over or choir sing or something. All right, what's next?
Next, we're looking at the gravestones of Mary Bryant and Lavinia Berry. Both of them were inspiration for characters in Julia Mood Peterkin's books.
Peggy, thank you so much for the tea. These 2 women befriended Julia Peterkin. She didn't know how to be a mistress of this plantation. She wasn't around children before. She was the third of 3 daughters. And then she was raised by her grandparents. She didn't know how to raise a baby. She didn't know how to plant. She didn't know how to do anything. They taught her to grow vegetables, grow flowers, grow fowl, ride a horse, about chickens, breeding chickens, make Scupperman wine, and in doing all of this, her confidence built up. Now, curiously, these 2 women, Mary Weeks is the namesake for the main character in Scarlett's Sister Mary. the book title comes because Sister Mary, who was in the church, was getting married at 15, and she and her husband had relations before they were married, and so that made her Scarlet Sister Mary. So she was ostracized by the church and kind of kicked out. Well, her baby was born in 7 months, and her husband, whose name was July, and his brother, the twin, this is the comedy, was June. July named this firstborn baby and only baby Unexpected. That was his official name in the book, Unexpected. They called him Onyx. There was a man named April in Black April, which was a bestseller. That came out in 26. Let's see what else. These remarkable, remarkable women were her inspiration. And Julia had to learn not to write white people in. If she tried to write herself in there, it came off as stale. This writing is 100 years old, and it's, to me, as I said, fresh. I would read it an 8th time. We're going to have Fiona read a couple of excerpts right now, so you can hear the language. I love how she writes about the land. You got a microphone, right?
The earth's richness and the sun's warmth make living an easy thing. Years go by without leaving a mark or footprint. Sometimes black years come in, determined to break the tranquil monotony. Earthquakes tumble down chimneys, storms break trees and houses, floods wash the earth so bare that its very bones are exposed. Droughts burn up crops and weeds with impartial cruelty, but the old plantation is swift to hide every scar made by all this wickedness. New chimneys are quickly built and houses mended. Trees thrust up young branches to fill empty spaces. New crops and weeds thrive under gentle rains and hot sunshine. Life fills and enfolds everything here, never overlooking in the press of work to be done the smallest or most insignificant creature, and silently, with wearless patience and diligence, strange miracles are wrought as youth rises out of decay and death becomes only another beginning.
Okay, every chapter is like that as well, but the dialogue is good too. And the dialogue can be read aloud. Okay, what's the next slide?
This just shows Fort Mott in relation to the rest of South Carolina.
I think I'm going to put Lawrence County on there next time.
Yeah.
Put y'all on the map. Yeah. All right.
And then we have the next sort of 4 slides are going to show people working and living on the plantation. So in this first one, we see some women working in the kitchen, and then on the right-hand side, there's a man standing outside who's wearing an apron.
That was a cook. That was Mr. Hayward, a real cook, and he was disabled at birth. He didn't have his tendons, and he would walk like this. But he couldn't read or write. The other thing about when these people leave the plantation, they're illiterate, and they don't write back, and even if they wrote back, the people couldn't read, so it comes word of mouth. The 2 women, is it 2 women in there?
3.
Would be 3, yeah. To show that she did have a privileged life. She knew she did. I mean, she was a plantation mistress, for Pete's sakes. Money was not an object, except during the boll weevil time, her writing helped keep that plantation buoyant and in business. All right, next.
On the next slide, we have a man who is driving a cart, and then some people bent over working in the fields too.
Okay, put yourself back 100 years in rural South Carolina. Some people might have had phones, but the quarters, the farm workers' quarters, wouldn't. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have running water. There were no airplanes overhead. There were some cars, but the roads were not paved out into the country. There were no street lights. There were no dams. So the rivers would flood and wash out the bridges. And so you made your bread. You made the wheat to make your bread. You shot the deer and gutted the deer and dressed the deer for your food. You fished for that. You shot doves. You grew your vegetables. You washed your clothes. There was no dryer except the sunshine. These houses, Julia's house had indoor plumbing obviously when I went there just a couple of years ago, but early on they had indoor plumbing. It kind of reminds me of Biltmore House. They had indoor plumbing. All right, but there would be the sound of trace chains. There'd be the sound of mules and cattle and horses and chickens and hawks. And where can you hear that? Not very many places left anymore. And people calling out, and a group of people laughing. They'd have church services on Wednesday night. They had a chapel. They would have dances, weddings, funerals, of course. I've been to the graveyard of some of the descendants. What is the name of that grave? Oak something. But there's a teacher who in the Irmo School District who Kelly McClendon, who brings her class down to Calhoun County to clean that grave site, to groom those graves. And I was there when Jackie Whitmore, who was a direct descendant of Mary Bryant, brought carloads of people for a family reunion up, and I was there with Friends of the Congaree, and up come this whole big long line of cars full of people whose relatives were buried there, and he told them to walk carefully in the woods because some graves just have stones. And those people were so quiet, looking for their relatives. And to me, that's holy ground. And you don't know where everybody is buried, but you have some idea. And some of them might have been buried in pine boxes, and some of them might not have been. But I was there when the descendants came, and it's very moving. Okay, what's next?
Next, we're looking at two pictures. On the right-hand side is a woman with a bucket balanced on her head. And then on the left-hand side is somebody posed in the doorway of a house.
See those houses. Now, in the book, Scarlet Sister Mary, Green Thursday, and Black April, those are homes. They look like they know they have newspaper for installation. You've seen those. There's a loft, and there's a central fireplace, and there are 2 rooms, and there's not much privacy. There's very spare, maybe a dresser, no closet, maybe something to hang the dresses on. In the book, there's a beautiful description of the wedding dress that was made for Mary when she was at age 15. And they made this beautiful cake. Different people had made different sizes of the cake, and they stacked it up. And overnight, a rat ate a hole in it. And I mean, they contend with this kind of thing. So her aunt quickly filled it with icing, to beat the egg. It's just everything's hands-on, and you just feel it in your bones and your hands. And these pictures come from a book that Doris, it's called Roll, Jordan, Roll. And you may have it in your library. Carol, I don't know if you do. You wouldn't be able to check it out, but it's photographs from the Low Country during the Depression, during WPA. These may or may not have been taken at the property, but they were similar. Also, Julie Peterkin has dissertations written about her. She's named as one of the 100 most important women in South Carolina. She's written other books. Let me tell you about, I told you a little bit about Green Thursday. So Killdeer, well, I'm going to tell you the funny parts here. So I gave it away. So Killdeer had heard that, and his family had heard that if you put fish meal in the hole with the corn seed, your crop will be fertile. So they caught a whole bunch of catfish, and they put different parts of them in with the seeds and planted it. Well, dogs dug those up. And then the dogs dug up and ate the catfish, and then the birds ate the seed, and then there you go. They had a visiting pastor one time. This is in the book. And they had made a big batch of lemonade. I don't know where they got the lemons, but they got the lemons and the sugar. They made a big batch of lemonade, a lot of trouble, hundreds of lemons squeezed. And afterwards, they were going to offer the preacher the first taste until Sister Renee, or whatever she was called, Sister Clara, sneezed into the punch, and out come her false teeth, and they're circling around in the ice, and they would come up and smile, and then go back down and come up, and the visiting preacher was saying, and don't you want to throw that out? No, we don't want to throw that out. We spent a lot of money on time doing that, so they just waited and eventually fished out the dentures and then offered him the first cup, and he would not take it, and that made everybody mad. Okay, what's next?
On the following slide, we're looking closely at another two of those structures, those houses.
A working farm. So it is still a working farm, a sixth generation, and I've become friends with Amy Peterkin. She likes that I talk about her great-grandmother and promote her because I genuinely admire the writing. Black April is about a man named April and his family, and he was modeled after like a farm supervisor of some kind, someone with power. That reads really well. And I don't know if you're, Connie, what did you try to find it in the library? There weren't any Julia Mood Peterkin books in the library?
The only books they had in the library were in the reference room, so you could not actually check them out. So I found it difficult to find her books. I downloaded them on Kindle, and that was the easiest way to access them, or thrift books, but you can't check them out in Lawrence County at the library.
Maybe we can donate a copy or something. I don't know how that works, Carol. But her being from here, but see, nobody's known about her, really. It's been 100 years. She was big time in New York City, and they had money. She left Willie on the plantation. He was kind of a reserved man. She spent a lot of time raising her grandson, but so did the other women raise the grandson too. He wasn't wanting. Okay, what's next?
Yeah, on the following slide, you can see Julia with the Hepburns at a horse race. as well. That's her on the right-hand side, and she's in this leopard skin coat.
And she looked saucy.
Yeah.
You know, she was full of herself, and she was so talented. All right, what's next?
Then we have a playbill from Scarlet Sister Mary, where Ethel Barrymore played Sister Mary.
That's one of the new slides. And then there's a new slide of those descendants. There's a new slide of the Carl Sandburg and the Minkin. And this is a new slide that we've actually found a picture of the playbill. I mean, it was real. She was on Broadway. She was embarrassed by the performance. It didn't last that long because they played it in blackface. And that was embarrassing. All right, what's next?
And then we have our final slide where we can see some writing about Julia. So some of these books are like dissertations up there, and then in these notable South Carolina women, remarkable South Carolina women. Yeah.
Okay. How's our time?
We're perfect. 7:50.
All right, what questions might you have about her?
You wanted us to just call up.
Yes, I did.
What would you say was the most exciting thing for you personally in your journey in studying this writer?
I appreciate that question because you sense that I'm enthusiastic about her. I'm biased. I think she's wonderful. I think meeting her granddaughter and going on her land was really important. Feeling that and being welcome to do that. We can't find her voice yet. If you do research, her voice is at the Charleston History Museum, where there are reel-to-reel tapes. And the family still has some tapes, but they haven't taken the time. James Dickey also did a documentary about her, but we can't find that yet. But James Dickey spent some time down there and thought she was, I mean, he was a poet of the whole United States in 65 and 66, and he taught at the University of South Carolina. I know people who took classes with him. I would say going on the land, meeting the family, but continuing to research, Peggy, continuing to research and read the books over and over. I just immerse. I don't know, Connie, what you thought. It really starches your hair, as I said, the first few times you read it, you go, oh, it'd probably be banned. Because it's like, these are lifestyles that, but it also shows aspirations and confidence of the women taking control of their lives and making lovely families, even if they are from different men. All right, another question.
Hi, thank you for coming and talking to us about her and introducing her to us. The three of us read Scarlet Sister Mary and really enjoyed reading it. And like you said, it was surprisingly readable and a fun read. My question is, how was the book received here in South Carolina?
Oh.
You know, won a Pulitzer, but was it controversial? Was it well-liked? Did it sell well?
Well, that is a very insightful question, and I should have mentioned it before. She was ostracized. She was ostracized because she wrote about black people with real feelings and real emotions, and also because she got her name in the paper. Our mother-in-law told her, not her mother, her grandmother told her, a proper lady is only in the paper when she is born, married, and died, when she dies. And also, she told her, Julia, you're not very attractive, so you're going to need to be rich. Marry money or something like that. It was not well received at all. And there's a wonderful story in the Susan Millar's biography. I highly recommend that book. A Devil and a Good Woman. Now, the library could have that one, too. That one's in print. So when it sold okay, but when Black April came out, it was selling, but the state paper didn't write any review about it. And again, Julie was ostracized, but she went like, so I'm going to write about this. This is where my life is taking me, like that. And she palled around with the NAACP people. Is it Walter White, the Harlem Renaissance people? She went to parties where there were black people present. But she marched herself to the book editor's home and rang the doorbell or knocked on the doorbell and said, why haven't you reviewed my book? And so it was reviewed. And then other times it would be reviewed, but it'd be so sanitized it wasn't really very good. But nationally, the black newspapers would carry information about it, and a lot of the Chicago Defender didn't know if she were white or black. Some of the black writers at that time were writing about urban concerns. Walter White, I'm trying to think of some of the other writers at that time in the 1920s. They were writing not of the earthiness, and I mean that in a compliment, the real close to the earth, the real hard work, the making of the clothes, the harvesting of the crops. But eventually, when she won that Pulitzer, that got some people's attention. But then, in the 1930s, she disappeared. She said, I'm done with this famous life. People were coming to her house, writing her for books, invading her privacy. She had had enough. And she receded from public life. And she died in 1961, and she's buried in the St. Matthew's Episcopal Church Cemetery. So my job, I have accepted, is to talk about her and get people to read her 1920s work, okay? Other questions? Fiona? Anybody? Did you like this?
What I found really interesting about the book was how the part that Fiona read just a little while ago, I underlined that because it's such a beautiful description of the land, but the role that religion played and superstition hand in hand, like it was, and I've only read Scarlet Sister Mary, but how strong she was, that she made her own way despite what everyone else around her expected her to be. But the role of, and I didn't realize that Julia Peterkin had a degree in religion. Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. So the role of religion and the superstition, the charms, the medicine men, that it was all together. It's a whole culture that she brought to life that I didn't really understand until I read that.
There were stories in there about a baby with a chicken picked its eyes out. I mean, that's just how awful. There was a story of a nurse that went with the white family up to the mountains for the summer, and her daughter was expecting twins. She couldn't contact her. She couldn't stay. She had to go with the white family. And when she came back, she was putting the little boy to bed, and the father, this little boy didn't have a mother anymore. The father said, "It's bad." And the babies had been buried and dug up by animals. And she writes about these things. Flannery O'Connor wrote about very hard, brutal things. She's a fine writer. But like you, Connie, I liked her spirit. I liked Scarlet Sister Mary's spirit, which came from Julia. Her own journey. Okay. Other questions or comments? I'm so glad you came out, especially on a rainy night, for a very important topic. And you can buy the book on Amazon or Thrift Books for not very much money. But if you find a copy of Roll Jordan Roll for less than $200, call me.
Ann, can you tell us where we can find your book? Your
Oh,
of
my book?
poetry. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, all these books have been paid, they're paid for, and I offer them for sale for like $12, and I just put them in this little account that I have, and it allows me to support poetry causes. I think she has some
Okay.
in there.
She has some with us.
Yeah, and if you just have a 10, that's fine too. But the other day, someone just said, here's a 20, just keep it, because I use it, well, partially to pay Fiona to underwrite poetry contests. And that book those poems won awards. So thank you for asking. I hope you enjoy your copy. Carol's a lot of stories in there about my folks. Okay, thank you all very much. I don't want to keep you too long.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, Fiona, for coming and helping. Thank you, all of you, for coming. We're so glad that you came and hope that you will come back for other events. If you'd like to purchase a book, I'm sure Fiona can help you. And we're so grateful that you came, grateful for what your family and yourself have given to Lawrence County. We're thankful for the message that you shared, and we're glad to know more about Julia Mood Peterkins.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to meet all of you if you get a chance. Thank you, Peggy, for this wonderful tea.